This episode is brought to you by Redfin. You're listening to a podcast, which means you're probably multitasking. Maybe even scrolling home listings on Redfin, saving homes without expecting to get them. But Redfin isn't just built for endless browsing. It's built to help you find and own a home. With agents who close twice as many deals, when you find the one, you've got a real shot at getting it. Get started at redfin.com. Own the dream.
If you look for it, every day has cause for celebration. Celebrate a friend for their promotion, baby wedding, life thing. Celebrate yourself for keeping the couch warm. It's no easy feat, especially if it's a big couch. Or maybe you just want to celebrate living in 2023, where you can get beer, wine, and spirits delivered from Drizzly in under 60 minutes without leaving said couch. So download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com and get your favorite drinks delivered today.
Good evening, everybody. It's Jay Scott. This is The Hook Rocks, the ultimate rock community podcast. Hope everybody is staying healthy, staying safe, trying to keep busy, trying to stay social. Feel like I've been repeating myself here over the last several episodes, but it's what we got to do. Hopefully it's, over sooner than later and we can get back to what will be the new normal as soon as possible. I'm a huge fan of our next guest, and he is someone I've been listening to since I was younger in my youth, and I have the pleasure to introduce Mr. Joe Satriani. How you doing today, Joe?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to hear you're doing good as well, Jay.
Well, again, thanks for doing this. I appreciate it. I'd like to start out with the same question we always ask a first-time guest, and that is the essence of the show. Just like every rock song has a hook that sucks you in, every rock fan has a moment, whether it's a song, an album, a band or performance that hooked them on rock and roll. What was it for you?
Wow, those moments came really early because I was the youngest of 5 kids. So my older sisters, my older brother were really living the music and the social upheaval of the 60s right from the beginning. I guess from the late 50s all the way through when I started to go to high school in 70. So I can remember like it was yesterday. I must have been just when the Rolling Stones came out, because we were up in the country somewhere in Vermont. My sisters were being driven to a teenage dance of some kind, and they just let me come along for the ride. And I begged to, be able to peek in the door to where my sisters were going, and they let me walk in to the side of this small, I don't know, maybe there's 200 kids in this little rec area, that was in this small town. I think it was Poultney, Vermont, some little town. And so I'm standing by the door, and I'm watching all these teenagers, which, of course, when you're 5 years old, they're the coolest things ever to you, And there's music playing, and kids are dancing, and I look at the band, and I hear this music, and I think, this is the greatest thing I've ever experienced in my entire life. Now, this is obviously a little kid thinking, this is, besides, parental love, ice cream, and whatever else is exciting when you're that young. But this was important because I can still remember it for some reason. And they were playing Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones. And I think it had just come out. So I don't know what that is, 1963 or something like that. So that's what I'm thinking of. I'm really young, and I'm just enveloped by that sound. And there was a saxophone player playing Keith Richards' part, that was obviously played with a first generation distortion pedal of some kind on the guitar. But I just remember thinking this is the most profound experience I've ever had in all my years on the planet. And it stayed with me, and I just kept trying to relive that, whatever that was, that excitement, that to recreate that world for myself. And I insisted on becoming a drummer not too long after that, and I played a lot of Rolling Stones music and Beatles music, and basically anything that my older siblings were listening to, because I thought they were the coolest. So that they were responsible for my musical upbringing.
Yeah, I had a similar experience too with my older brother. I think it's important sometimes when you are diving into music and you have an older sibling that likes rock and roll, whatever, and you hear that coming from their bedroom, and they have all their friends over, and you're a young kid, and you, of course, like you just said, you look at a teenager and they're the coolest things ever, and you want to be like them, and you want to listen to what they're listening to. So, that transfer of the art from an older sibling is, I've always said, it's really important when you're growing up as a kid.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing. It really is. I was, it's funny when I go over in my mind experiences like that. It's cloudy, first of all, because I know that the brain reorganizes memories. The scientists have proven that. It's a funny little thing that we do to our memories to make ourselves feel good about where we came from, where we're going. But every time I relive that story, I start to ask myself, now, when was that like? And then eventually I start really getting down to specifics, and I realize, now, wait a minute, I couldn't have been 5. I must have been a little bit older. I must have been 7 or something like that, because of the release date of the single. That sort of historical rock and roll musician part of my brain kicks in and says, now, wait a minute, that single didn't come out until 65. But so that's what I realize that, when somebody asks you a question like that, that part of it is how your brain has turned your experience into almost like a myth that you rely on. And obviously that happened so quickly to me. But it makes sense when I go over that with the more structured part of my brain, and I realize, no, that makes sense, because if that single came out in 65, and I started playing drums when I was 9, then that meant that it took me 2 years to talk my parents into buying me some kind of a drum kit, which I think is very important when you think about, you can imagine the 5th kid, your parents are like losing their minds, and it's the 60s and everything is being turned upside down. And along comes this little squirt who wants to like really make a bunch of racket in the basement, so. Oh, my poor family. They had to put up with me.
Well, they're either going crazy at that time, or they've built up patience. They've built up the stamina. and at that
I
time,
think they did. And then, of course, my older sisters were just dying to go to college, to get out of the house. And then slowly, by the time my parents had acquiesced and let my band rehearse in the basement, all my siblings had left. They were living out of the house, or they were still in college or something like that. So it was only, but I think my parents at that point thought that they wanted their little kid to make as much noise to piss off their neighbors, because maybe they didn't get along with their neighbors anyway. So they were my staunchest allies, actually. They used to talk down the police all the time when neighbors used to call for noise complaints, So I have to give them great thanks for allowing us to do that.
Absolutely. Sticking up for the kid and letting you play.
Yeah.
Where did it happen, or when did it happen that you wanted to pick up a guitar and play?
Well, there were two moments that were extremely important. I mean, the first one was sort of a gentle nudging. It was because I have 3 sisters, and the youngest of the 3 is a few years older than myself, was a folk guitar player throughout high school. So I used to see her, in the house, around the house. I actually saw her play a performance at her school, playing guitar. And so while I was banging the drums, I started to notice, wow, she can really like go off in a corner and quietly play music and no one seems to be upset. Whereas every time I sat behind the drums, I just get grief. And that was partly because I wasn't very good, but also because it's extremely noisy to practice drums. There's just no way around it. And so there's this guitar hanging around, and I'm getting used to the idea, and I'm slowly getting introduced to rock guitarists of the mid to late 60s through my older siblings. And I'm becoming a Hendrix fanatic. I just absolutely love Hendrix and Jimmy Page and Clapton and the whole group of them. Of course, I'm already totally a Beatles and Stones freak by then. And but I started to wane on the drums because I wasn't feeling like I was going to really be very good. I could tell I'd hit some sort of physical wall, where my coordination was just not up to what I was listening to on records of my favorite bands, And so there's a couple of years where who knows what I'm doing. I'm just chasing girls, having fun, getting in trouble, trying to get some decent grades in school. And then one day in 1970, Jimi Hendrix dies, and I get the news. And for some reason, that was the catalyst. I found out as I was heading out to football practice. I immediately turned around and took off my gear, told the coach I was quitting to become a guitarist. I went home that night and I told everybody over dinner that's what I was going to do. I'm not quite sure what got me to that point, but I was so devastated by Hendrix dying that I just thought, this is what I've been waiting, the decision I was waiting to make. And it just, his untimely death sort of, forced it to happen.
Well, it was the connection, of his music that made you feel that way. That's the beautiful thing about music. Even in its darkest times or its biggest challenges, or when news like that happens, you have that connection with people. You have that, connection with the audience that knows your music, and the music then lives on, and it certainly did with Hendrix. It's
amazing. The power of music is absolutely amazing. It's you really can't. You just can't quantify it. You can't figure it out. It's interesting that, as I've been really fortunate to stick around a long time and develop a life around creating music and performing for people, making albums. I've experienced that magic in so many different ways. Whereas when I was 14, I an intellectual dwarf, as all teenagers start out, mostly hormones and bodily tissues than brain power. So it's hard for me to really recall exactly what I was thinking. I can tell you what I was feeling, which was just, a rush of emotions and energy and a certainty that somehow the music would work out. I didn't know the specifics of what being a musician was going to be, or what I would play, or how I'd make a living, or any of that. But I know that the feeling was that there was a path that was opening up, and it was the only path to take. And it was a road that was built with sound and emotions, and it just seemed the right thing to do at the time. But it's freaky just to think that I do it in front of thousands of people, and I do it alone in my studio, just getting inspired about one small feeling about a person, a place, an event, and I create a song, and then I get to share it with the world, and then, on record, and then get to do it in front of them all around the world. It's just, it's difficult to grasp, actually, the enormity of something that we still can't figure out, like why it happens. Why is that musical experience so profound to us? It's really remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about songs and you think about how they connect with people, at least for me, I'm only speaking, I can't speak for anybody else, but for me, sometimes it helps me relate to something that I'm going through, or helps me enjoy something that I've experienced. I mean, you've got the good time music, and then you've got the music that has maybe more of a deeper connection with you. So I think it's just that vehicle people use throughout their life to help them. You know, you mentioned your memory bank. You know, you mentioned how you file memories. It helps people keep memories alive that they had, you know, years ago, or with people that they know maybe no longer see anymore, or experiences that they no longer do anymore. So it has so many facets to it, and so many different, you know, ways to enjoy it, and reasons to, you know, maybe not even sometimes enjoy it, maybe also sometimes help you reflect on something that was a challenge or a sad moment in your life. It really has the power to do that.
Yes, yeah. It's something that I try to harness when I'm writing music. You know, I read this thing a number of years ago that really fascinated me, and it was about how the brain files memories and then goes back and reorganizes them, changes them to fit with what our personality thinks it needs, like the how it needs to remember something. And this is why, like in court cases, eyewitness recollections are so unreliable, because people sort of touch up their memories of things for some reason, and it's difficult to figure out why that happens. But I've used, once I realized that, and if I can go on a little bit about this, the experiment that I read about was fascinating to me, and it had to do with the timing of events and the memory of them, and how the brain will actually change the sequence of events in somebody's memory to make them more palatable. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but so that they feel better about the memory. And they did a little experiment where when people were asleep, and when they wake them up, they would expose them to a particular stimulus, like a sound, like an alarm clock or something with an unusual sound. And these people would wake up thinking that they were dreaming about that sound, and then they woke up, when in actual reality they were asleep, and then the sound was external. They weren't dreaming about a sound, and then they woke up and heard the sound. They actually were awakened by the sound, but their brain said, "No, we're going to rearrange that." And the brain does it quickly, in a matter of microseconds. It says, "We're going to flip it around. We were dreaming about, a bell, and then woke up, and then miraculously we heard the bell." And that fascinated me. And I thought, well, that's really strange. We are really unusual as a species that we think we're in control of things, but actually our sense of reality is completely being reinvented by our brain storage and how it likes to reorganize things. So I started thinking more and more about the connection to the way that I've written songs over the years, and how I can sort of ramp that up. And specifically about how I can go and I can imagine a feeling that I have about something that might be small. And the simplest example would be, let's say, your first sip of a glass of wine, and you go, "That's good," right? And then, but if you think of that experience, you go, what if when you drank that, first sip of wine, you felt like you had never tasted anything like that before in your entire life, and now your entire life is going to be better than ever before? In other words, you have tasted the elixir of life, and you can take another sip of it. And I thought, well, if that was the case, how would you write a song about that? And then I went back and I was thinking about songs where I had actually unconsciously done that. Like, there was a song I had written many years ago called "The Crush of Love," and actually it started quite innocently. I was at home practicing. My wife was out working, and she called and said, "Oh, work is dragging, and I'm going to miss dinner, but I'll be back by like 9 or something like that." Right? So everything's real cool, and I hang up and I go, "That's interesting. Like, okay, so I'm a little sad. We're not going to go have dinner together." And so I just took that feeling and I just kept like amplifying it and turning it into a story of ridiculous proportions. And then I thought, well, now what's the soundtrack to that? what if she called and said, not only am I not coming over dinner, but I'm never coming home, or something totally outrageous, and that became the fuel and the raw material, emotional material to write the song. And it's been a very interesting way to really investigate small feelings to find out, if I'm, maybe they're bigger and maybe I'm suppressing it. Maybe the memory that I have has been altered and I should really think hard about it because maybe it's different. Just like the story of Satisfaction. My brain thinks that I was really small when I heard it, but I know when I checked the dates that I was just a little bit older. I wasn't 5. I had to have been 6 going on 7, So why do I remember it differently? I don't know. But the method has served me well all the way to the making of the most recent record, where I did the same kind of thing. Where I had a theme, I had memories, and I just investigated them and then amplified them to epic proportions in order to squeeze more notes out of them.
When you're writing music, you've written both for lyrical songs and then instrumental songs. And when you're writing lyrics, you're able to tell a story, you're able to grab the audience by the words that you're using, help them relate to maybe similar situations, they connect with the song and the lyrics. When you're writing instrumentally, you don't have that vehicle, the words. You have to convey everything you are feeling with your emotion through the notes that you're playing. How do you approach it differently? I mean, obviously, you didn't write any songs lyrically for this new album, but in the past that you have, what is the difference in writing a song versus lyrically versus instrumentally?
Oh, well, there's 2 important sides of this. One is the obvious, which is when you don't have lyrics to transfer a very clear message to somebody, then the pressure is on your arrangement of the notes and your choice of the notes. So an example I use is, if you're going to write a song and it's about your house being on fire, all you have to do is start singing, "My house is on fire." And right away, your audience knows, oh, the song is about this guy's house is on fire, So, a transmission of the meaning of the song is accomplished very quickly, right from the beginning of the song. And all the lyricist has to do is say it. Now, obviously, lots of lyrics are, sometimes they're just, "I love you," "I want you," "let's dance," they're very obvious like that. But then sometimes they're unusual. And you go, well, what is he singing about? You're listening to Peter Gabriel sing a song, and you're thinking, well, it's going to be like the second verse by the time I figure out what it is he's actually talking about. So some lyrics are more poetic and others are more, they want you to know right from the start what the song's about. And but here's something that people never think about when they ask me that question, which is I can tell them, for example. When I'm writing songs with Sammy Hagar, very often I write a song and I kind of know what I'm thinking it's about, but I don't know what he's going to come up with. So I don't even know the meaning of the song until he writes the lyrics, and we may not know it as a band until 2 months later after the music is already recorded. Just think about that. You get a guitarist like with typical with Chickenfoot is I create a bunch of demos. I send the demos out to the band. They pick, 10, 12 songs out of the 20 that I send them. We somehow manage to all be in one room together for a couple of days. We knock out these things. Sammy's listening, maybe just riffing around, but he hasn't really decided what the song is going to be about. He might use my working title. He might not. And then everybody goes away. Chad goes back to the Chili Peppers. I go out on tour, and then 2 months later we get back together and Sammy says, I think this song is about, this. And we all go, huh? Really? So that kind of blows the whole theory of somebody writing music for a particular lyric. That's like, very few people do that. Like Elton John, Bernie Taupin famously, would write in that format. Bernie would write lyrics, and Elton would receive the lyrics in the morning, and he would write the music in a big flurry of activity, and then they'd record it in the afternoon. That's like almost unheard of in the music industry, that writers work like that. Mostly there's a guy's got a riff and a groove and some chords, and they record it, and slowly the singer decides this song is about me going to outer space, or having a great time with somebody, or a tragedy, or some historical event that I read about, or something like that, or it's all political or whatever. You know what I mean? So now I get that question all the time. What's the difference? But I always feel like I got to wave that flag and say, it's not that cut and dry. and plus there are instrumental elements within a vocal song that are extremely important to help send the message. And I go back to like the early Hendrix songs, like Purple Haze. It's like the sound of the guitar. How important is that? In a way, Jimi Hendrix was always an instrumentalist while he was also singing over the songs, because he married the sound and his note selection with the theme of the song so well. Not everyone does that. Think about country music. Very often the music accompanies a story, and it's not as specific, let's say, as the songs on the first Jimi Hendrix Experience album, where every freaking guitar performance is so specifically tied to what Jimmy is singing about. It's not your average, rock, psychedelic rock, whatever you want to call it. But in country music, there's like a convention of like you have to, play a certain way to be country, and then it's simply a platform for the singer to start singing and telling you the story of the song. It's such a completely different way of writing and organizing music, with very little instrumental involvement. And so, obviously, I could go on for hours, and
Sure.
This would not help your podcast.
No, it's definitely interesting. I love the answer, and I just, when I've asked this question before, the writer of the lyrics has that vulnerable point where he's writing a song about something that means something to him, or a memory that he's had where maybe it wasn't the best experience of his life, and he's vulnerable because he's putting that out to the audience lyrically. He's telling a story. Whereas instrumentally, you're still telling a story through the notes. But it's just a different connection, because ultimately people are going to connect with it with how they feel. And
yes, yeah.
And so that's why I was just asking, like, when you have written a song with words versus the instrumentals that, you're known for, is there a difference in your approach of, are you writing about something that you feel or have felt in the past that, it was either happy, sad, or whatever the emotion is? And how do you convey that emotion when you don't have the words to tell that story?
Oh, well, I don't know how to answer that, because I don't know, actually, but I can tell you a story that is such a perfect example of how whatever your inspiration is, once you play it and you give it to the fans, you've given it away. And so here's the story behind the song Crying from my Extremist album. So my father passed away a few years before I recorded that album. And so I'd written this song one day playing keyboards, just trying to figure out how to focus, in my grieving, to focus on all the great times and all the good elements of our life together while he was alive. And so I wrote this song, and I didn't know if it would, it's for public consumption or anything. I just wrote it, and then I thought, I really do want to try to record this, And I was kind of shy about, telling everybody, what the song was really about. Because I thought, I don't know if it helps anybody. And right away when we started to work on it, people thought it was a beautiful song, a love song. And I didn't interrupt them, for how they reacted to it. And we go to record the song, and the performance of my guitar is a one-take performance recorded by mistake, because we're that afternoon we were focusing on trying to get Matt and Greg Bissonette to lay down the basic drums and bass. I programmed a keyboard for them to listen to, but at one moment, Andy John says, Joe, why don't you just play along so they kind of know where the melody's going? Maybe that'll help, in their performance. And then he went back to concentrating on the drums and the bass, and me and the assistant just said, well, what should we do? And I said, well, let's just use this little headphone amp, and we'll just go right to tape. Don't worry about it. I wasn't thinking about it. But then, as very often happens in the arts, you don't know when you're going to do your work. You never know when you're going to play something good and when you're going to suck. But right then, that afternoon, in Ocean Way Studios, for some reason, I played the performance that was going to be the best performance of me playing that song ever. Just so happened I was plugged into a little headphone amp that went direct to tape, and that was it. And Andy knew as soon as we were done. Andy Johns turned around, and he was like, "Oh my God, you just played the performance of your lifetime, and I didn't record it properly." He was so upset that it had happened that way. And I just thought, well, I'll just play it again. And he looked at me like, you're never going to play that again. And, he was right, and so you never know when things like that happen. But here's the funny part as it relates to your question. So it comes out on the Extremist album, and we're out on tour for months. And I get a call from my manager saying that there's a German football program. We call it soccer. They call it football. And they've been using the song Crying as their theme song. And they use it to play the highlights of that week's, greatest triumphs and tragedies in European football. And they want you to come on the show and play it live. And I thought, oh, this is, my dad would be laughing hysterically about this. And I thought, okay, this is a new experience. That they don't know what the song is about, obviously, and the audience has already thought it was a romantic song, and now it's being used by this soccer program on television in Germany, and I'm going to go play it live in front of a live audience. It was such a bizarre lesson in how when you create a song, you have no control how people are going to use it. They may use it as a celebratory song about that week's events in soccer, or they may use it as, their song about love attained or unrequited love or whatever. I don't think anybody used it for the reason that got me to write the song. But then again, like I said, once you play it for people, you're kind of giving it away, and that's the power of the instrumental music. Is that people can use it. And that's kind of like hits at the point of being a musician, is that we are supposed to make music for people. That's kind of like our job. So it's a perfect example of things working.
I think of the song Born in the USA by Springsteen, where a lot of politicians use it as this patriotic song when they come on stage for a rally or whatever. And lyrically, the song is about the struggles of the middle class and, war veterans coming back from the war. It's really not a patriotic song.
It's a very dark, powerful song. Yeah.
So I want to get to the new album before we go. I love the conversation we've been having, but the new album, Shapeshifting, came out this month. Love it. Enjoy the energy of the music. How was the approach to this album that differed from the record before, What Happens Next, and your other music that you've released?
Well, I picked a new location and put together partly a new set of co-conspirators, band members, engineers. The big deal was, I think, getting out of town, going to Valencia, California, working with producer-engineer Jim Scott, a legendary man in the record-making world. And I never thought he'd be interested in doing an instrumental record, but it was just by accident that drummer Kenny Aronoff just mentioned him to me because he had just done a session with him, and Kenny and I were trading texts about the Hendrix tour that we were doing last year. We did 2 runs of the Experience Hendrix tour, and when he mentioned him in the text, I thought, maybe he's just sitting around waiting for somebody like me to call. So because I just thought, well, he works with Tom Petty and Chili Peppers and Rage Against the Machine. Why would he do a record with a guitar? So, but I gave him a call, and he was really up for it. And my wife and I drove down there from San Francisco just to check the place out, and I just really liked him, and I loved his studio. What a crazy funhouse place! Great gear, very cool atmosphere, and I just thought, wow, something special can happen here, And then I decided I thought I could get Kenny Aronoff and Chris Chaney together as my rhythm section. I'd done a record with Chris. We'd done Unstoppable Momentum a few years ago. I really loved his energy, his musicianship, great personality, and of course, just his bass playing is just really fantastic. Very flexible, always creative, and the utmost professional in the studio. And I just thought, wow, I bet he would go really well with Kenny. And of course, every night, I'd been on stage with Kenny playing Hendrix, and we were just having a blast. It was really overt, crazy. Watching him do crazy Mitch Mitchell every night was really fun. And we had toured before in Chickenfoot, maybe 8 years ago or something like that. So I knew what Kenny was like when he was doing a job properly, trying to emulate somebody else on stage every night. But I also knew him for being himself and his influences, which were not far from mine, really. He was a total Mitch Mitchell fan like I am, so it just seemed like the right thing to do. And I got them all together right at the end of August, right before our second Hendrix run. And in 10 days, we knocked out this stuff. It was just so much fun playing with them and being in the studio with them. I had with me Eric Codier, who I've been making records with since, '96. He's been an editor. He's been a keyboard player, guitar player. He came out on tour with us a couple of times, and we've made, a totally electronic record together, Engines of Creation, and then he's been involved in quite a few albums, either just editing or adding keyboards or being sort of like an associate producer. So we've done a lot of work together, and it was great to have him on the team as well. So it was a really comfortable yet energizing mix of people. And I brought them this weird concept, which was, let's make every song different. Everybody can change their musical personality to make the song work. In other words, it's going to be opposite from what you usually do, which is you show up and someone says, this is a metal record, so everybody play metal. We're going to arrange the songs to be metal, or, it could be blues or reggae, who knows what. But instead of making an album where everybody and all the performances fit the theme of the album, I said, why don't we all change to fit the theme of each and every song? So every song is a separate opportunity to apply a different way of playing. And that was what the theme Shapeshifting implied to everybody, which was, let's shapeshift musically for each song.
I did notice the diversity in the songs that are on the album. When you are recording a new record, a new album, is it important for you to find that evolution of being an artist, find something different to inspire you?
I think there are times when I adopt a more singular view, and then there are other times where I'm completely just like multiple personality guy, I don't know what that is, like why I go through those different moods and to different degrees. But sometimes I just get an idea and I just want to run with it as much as I can, I think I've released albums that were very focused, and then other albums like Shapeshifting, which flirted with the idea of compositional diversity, but not so much in playing diversity. This time I really surrendered to each song, and not just technique-wise, because I knew that no matter what, I was always going to sound like me, and you can't get away from yourself. But you can do things, you can allow the situation to push you into a new territory. So, for instance, like with a song like "Falling Stars" or "Hear the Blue River," I would allow Jim Scott to say to me, "Joe, we should do a different kind of guitar, and let's fool around with amps." And I would just say, "Yes, yeah. You tell me what you think would be cool," and we would spend a few hours playing every amp all over the place, changing guitars until we all thought something was really different and interesting, and then I would just do it. In other words, I didn't have an agenda to promote myself as a certain kind of guitar player, something you might do when you were 20 and you're trying to, get a toe in the music business world. You're very focused, I can do this, and but when you've been around and you've put out 16, 17 studio albums and countless live DVDs and everything, that whole thing about proving who you are and your identity and your technical level, it just doesn't matter anymore. Everybody knows who you are. They all know you can play. And so it seemed like the perfect moment to just surrender to the theme of the album and each song, and not worry about your career, so to speak, driving your amp choice or how many notes you play. So that was really, it was a fantastic sort of like playhouse attitude every day I went to the studio, because I really didn't know what I was going to be playing, what amp I was going to be using. I would just make it happen. And sometimes it was with stuff that sounded obviously like me, and then other times, like with the song Yesterday's Yesterday, it was just the three of us just in a room improvising, changing guitars for every take, changing the way I play, just sort of bouncing off of each other. And then all of a sudden everyone would say, "Hey, that was a take. Like there was magic on that one." And we just leave it. And, nobody said, "Hey, that's not my identity," or "That's not what I'm known for," or, "How's that going to fly in the lead guitar magazine?" Or, it's like all those things that really don't matter, but for some reason people worry about when they're thinking about their career, instead of people really should be thinking about making inspired music. I think that's more important.
Do you enjoy that spontaneity that happens like that, or do you like the more, strict approach to coming in with everyone's on the same page, everyone knows what they're going to do? Which do you prefer?
Well, to tell you the truth, one allows the other to happen. Like anybody can show up unprepared and wing it. You know what I mean? That doesn't actually take effort. But there's a difference when you arrange a song very tightly, and then you turn to the bass player and you say, "You see these 8 bars here? I need you to just be like the coolest bass player and come up with something great." That takes a lot of musicianship to suddenly turn around and offer up, 100 different really cool ideas perfectly played. But that's what studio musicians do. That's what I asked of, Chris Chaney and of Kenny Aronoff, which is I'd say to them, "You got every take, you can try something different. But we have to get to the chorus here, and then this is where the bridge comes." And they want to know that. Musicians like to know where it is they're supposed to nail a part and where they're allowed to fool around. It helps them focus their improvisation. And so I think that's extremely important. And I've been on both sides of it, where we've recorded stuff that we weren't supposed to record, and it's turned out to be magical. But then it's taken some real hard work in the studio to wrestle that recording into shape. A good example would be Down the Drain on the first Chickenfoot record. We were all set up to record an entirely different song, and for some reason, Chad and I just started playing something. We were looking at each other. We had, a nod and a wink, and we were talking about something, and we just started this riff, and Mike joined in, and it just turned into a song. But we all were playing differently because we were expecting Andy to yell at us in the headphones saying, "Will you guys stop fooling around? Let's get to this track," right? But of course, what we hear and we see is we see Sammy Hagar slowly crossing this huge studio room at Skywalker Sound, which can hold like 200-piece orchestra. And he's crossing over through the studio where we're playing, and he's laughing and talking. He gets into his vocal booth, and it's on the album. You hear him laughing and saying, "Hey, Joe, hey, Chief, is that the new song? Is that new song? This is good. This is good." And then he just starts improvising some lyrics, And so after about 8 minutes, we finally laugh, and then we go, "Okay, that was really a lot of fun." And then we go back and we listen to it. We go, "No, that's really good. That's something." And then but then we had to be musicians, like, trained musicians, that say, "Okay, if we're going to use this, if this was an instant composition that just happened, we need to tighten it up. We need a bridge somewhere." And so we went out and quickly wrote a bridge, and we were able to edit it in there. And then Mike and Sammy got together, and they said, "Okay, we'll just, whatever it was I was singing about, we're just going to," for some reason Sammy was screaming "down the drain." It's all down the drain. So he and Mike got together, and they kind of formalized it and overdubbed the vocals. But I mean, that, you have to be prepared as a musician for those moments to happen. So it's, the art of improvisation actually takes a lot of work. But I guess that's what I'm getting at.
No, that's amazing. I love that story. I love the approach. I mean, I know you recorded with Glenn Hughes and Chad Smith on your previous album, and now you have a whole new harem that you did record with this new record. So I do like the different approaches and different types of styles. This album has so much diversity in it, but so much energy. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
Well, Joe, it's been a blast. Thanks for a great conversation. I enjoyed it. It was so interesting. We could go on forever, but thank you again for doing this.
It's been a real pleasure, Jay. Thank you.
That's Joe Satriani. I'm Jay Scott. This is the Hook Rocks, the Ultimate Rock Community Podcast. Stay safe, stay healthy. We'll talk again soon.
LifeLock, how can I help?
The IRS said I filed my return, but I haven't.
1 in 4 tax-paying Americans has paid the price of identity fraud.
What do I do?
My refund, though.
I'm freaking out.
Don't worry, I can fix this.
LifeLock fixes identity theft guaranteed and gets your money back with up to $3 million in coverage.
I'm so relieved.
No problem. I'll be with you every step of the way.
1 in 4 was a fraud-paying American. Not anymore. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.